guys, welcome to Digit.in, and today we're reviewing Realme's latest smartphone to enter the market, the Realme X7 Pro. Now I actually wanted the funky color finish, but they sent a black one, but you know what, beggars can't be choosers. This phone on the other hand is packed with features, like super rich features that make it a very interesting device to test out. And given that it's just the start of the year, it also sets a very interesting trend for what's to come. But before we get into all of the details, make sure to hit the subscribe button on our channel, and of course there's also the bell icon. If you click on it, it makes sure you don't miss any updates from us in the future. With the essentials out of the way, let's begin. First, let's go over the specs of the Realme X7 Pro that we are reviewing. Now, this smartphone is powered by the MediaTek Dimensity 1000 Plus SoC. It's based on the 7nm process, supports 5G. This is also the same chipset we've already tested in the Reno 5 Pro 5G. So you have that. 8 gigs of DDR4 memory, LPDDR4 of course. There's 128 GB of storage on board, which is really nice. And as far as the display is concerned, that's another star feature. FHD Plus, Super AMOLED, but 120 Hz refresh rate and a polling rate of 240 Hz. So what that means is that you not only have a fast refresh rate display, but you also have fast touch recognition and very sensitive touch recognition, which is something gamers should love. Moving past that, you have a 64 megapixel quad camera setup. This is using the Sony IMX686 sensor for those of you who may be interested in that. The battery on this is 4500 mAh and supports 65 watt SuperDart charging. So overall, like, there is practically nothing that's been left out as far as features are concerned. But on paper, this phone makes a great case for itself, but the real question is, how does it perform? So let's dive right into the performance. Talking about the performance of the smartphone, now there are a few things to consider. First, let's just go over the benchmark numbers. Interestingly, this particular smartphone, despite the same chipset as the one found in Oppo Reno 5 Pro 5G, outperforms it by a small margin across a number of tests. For example, the AnTuTu score on the Realme X7 Pro is in the north of 5100,000, whereas for the Oppo was in the 400,000 range. The Geekbench 5 single core results are the highest on this smartphone, on the Realme X7 Pro. However, the multi-core results are slightly behind that of the Oppo Reno 5 Pro 5G. We can also take into account numbers from the Mi 10i, the OnePlus Nord, like we did in our previous review. Make sure to check that out. And you see that the Realme X7 Pro does have a performance edge. This is seen across multitude of benchmarks, be it Mobile Expert, be it 3D Mark Wildlife for testing the GPU performance, GFX Bench, which has 3 different tests: Aztec Ruins, Car Chase and Manhattan 3.1. Part of this could be attributed to the fact that unlike the Oppo Reno 5 Pro 5G, which prioritized slimness, this phone is slightly thicker than that and also incorporates a vapor cooling chamber. Because it's able to cool the SoC slightly better performance. It's the similar kind of thing we've seen with laptop processors, GPUs, desktop processors and GPUs. The better you cool them, the better they perform. But the proof of the pudding lies in the taste. And well, the taste is coming via gaming. So when we run Call of Duty Mobile on this phone, record metrics using Gamebench, other games like Asphalt 9, Shadowgun Legends, etc., we see that the Realme X7 Pro delivers stellar performance. For COD Mobile, we get an average frame rate of 60 FPS with a stability of 87%, and on a game like Asphalt 9, which is fairly light but quite fast paced, we see average frame rates of 59 FPS but with a much higher stability of 92%. That is again fairly impressive when you also factor in the fact that the phone does not heat up while gaming, and I've gamed on this for about an hour at a stretch. Call of Duty can be a little addicting, especially if you find yourself with some free time. So definitely no problems there. Performance wise, this phone does admirably well in day-to-day usage, whether it's browsing the web or shooting off emails, researching things online, watching YouTube videos, etc. Next, we've got the camera on the Realme X7 Pro. This smartphone has a 64 megapixel primary camera, which is basically powered by the Sony IMX686 sensor. You've got an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 2 megapixel monochrome black and white lens, and a 2 megapixel macro. So we're going to break this up into normal light and low light. In normal light, so we've basically come to expect fairly good results from the Sony sensors, whether they're 48 or 64 megapixel ones, in good daylight. In the initial times, or rather in the initial year, last year, there were some issues with the non-binned versus binned result where the difference is very obvious, but on the Realme X7 Pro, or rather as time has progressed, that difference has become less and less. On the X7 Pro, the advantage is that if you want to shoot an image where detail is very critical, you can move to the 64 megapixel mode, get the shot and expect fairly similar dynamic range to the binned result. Of course, the colors and the contrast are better when you're shooting in the binned mode. The dynamic range is slightly better with better retention in the shadows especially. So you will have to weigh the pros and cons of shooting. To be very honest, for most people, the binned mode is going to give you far better results, much more usable, take up less space on both your smartphone and your cloud backup storage. So I recommend sticking to the binned mode because this is 16, not 12, my bad. Next, you have the ultra wide lens. Now with the ultra wide camera, it is unfortunate that there is no autofocus on this lens because that would have helped with some really impressive creative framing. With the lack of an autofocusing lens, the ultra wide lens is slightly limited in its use cases. That is compounded by the fact that the dynamic range is severely limited, with highlight clippings happening far too easily and the sharpness in the corners being less than stellar. Then next you have the monochrome lens and the 2 megapixel macro. Now this is actually not just limited to Realme, but for any other smartphone manufacturer out there. If you're going to give a macro lens on a camera, you better be giving autofocus and image stabilization as well. When you actually get so close to the subject where you're like that close, even the minutest of handshakes will register in your photo, either resulting in something that's blurred, or because there's no autofocus, your shot will be out of focus. So a macro lens just does not work unless you have image stabilization and autofocus both available. When you do actually manage to get a usable shot, which is both in focus and like not shaky, the results are fairly decent, definitely social media worthy, but I would not be printing them because of the 2 megapixel limited resolution. Next, let's talk video. The video from the Realme X7 Pro is just above average, to be very honest. It is not the best, and audio pickup could definitely have been better. The phone does offer electronic image stabilization, which basically ends up cropping a little bit of your frame, but that's expected, and it's actually a feature that's better to have than not have any kind of image stabilization at all. Moving into low light situations, things change drastically. The IMX686 does produce better images than what we've seen in the past, but still does have issues with dynamic range and noise. You will also see that images shot in the low light mode have very little detail. But here's the thing, Realme is giving you a number of ultra low light modes. So you've got your regular low light, you've got an ultra low light, and you also have a pro mode. So in the ultra low light mode, you can switch over to pro controls. And when you do that, you can set your own ISO, shutter speed, white balance, etc. By doing that, you will actually end up with the best possible results, because that way you can actually choose whether to increase your ISO to the level that the camera would actually automatically do on its own or not. Keeping your ISO low and shutter speed also low allows you to pull in more light and not generate a lot of noise in that image. So over there, you will have to definitely tweak around with the settings. The fact is that it's really nice that Realme gives you all of this control, because if you choose to use it, you have it. Whereas other smartphones do just sort of leave it up to, the automated settings in here. With video as well, you do get an ultra low light mode, which is actually really nice because it enhances the video quality to a notable extent. But there are some catches. Like on the Oppo Reno 5 Pro 5G, the night mode, the ultra low light mode in video does enhance your frame, but you will definitely see noise in the shadow areas, and it's not the most pristine quality in terms of image, but it's, again, you can see a lot more in the frame, at least when compared to other smartphones that are available in the market which do not have this feature. So it's a trade-off between having this feature versus not having it, and I would personally say that having the feature is definitely a very, very beneficial thing in terms of the Realme X7 Pro. Now let's talk about the display and sound on this. The Realme X7 Pro has a gorgeous AMOLED display, 120Hz refresh rate, which is super nice to use because it just makes your animations, your scrolling, everything just so much smoother. And the 240Hz touch polling rate makes sure that when you're gaming, all of your touch responses are recorded as accurately as possible. So you have that. The peak brightness on this is way well past the 1000 nits mark, but that only happens when there's specific things and in localized regions on the display when you're looking at video. In day-to-day usage, you can easily expect about 600 nits of peak brightness, but the best part is if you're in the dark, this panel goes down all the way to just 2 nits. Very impressive, very easy on the eyes, and something that I personally really like. With respect to color accuracy, the AMOLED display does offer you multiple display modes, and you can choose between having a more saturated panel versus having one that is more sRGB compliant. It's up to you which one you choose to have, and honestly, they both look nice depending on what your preference is. I prefer the more natural look, so for me, that works better. The Realme X7 Pro boasts of Dolby Atmos sound, etc., but honestly, it does offer you stereo speakers, and that's pretty much where I would leave the experience. They're loud, the channel separation is fairly decent, it's okay, it's not the best, but at the end of the day, if you're going to watch a movie or catch a music video on YouTube, or just watch or proof a video like we do on the mobile, then you should be able to hear sound fairly clearly. Do note that the speakers, while they do get loud, they're not very clear at the loudest volume, and you would ideally want a silent and quiet environment, especially if you want to hear everything clearly. Next, let's talk about the battery, because that is the one thing that's powering all of these crazy features on the Realme X7 Pro. You get a 4500 mAh battery which supports the company's SuperDart charging, which is rated at 65 watts. That's actually one of the fastest charging methods available right now in the market, and it tops up the phone in under 40 minutes. That's insane. So when you have the phone's display set to 120 Hz, and that's how you choose to use it, you're going to have your battery be drained by about a little before the end of the day. Like for me personally, my day starts at 7 in the morning, the phone is off the charger, and by the time it's 8:39 p.m, I need to charge the phone up. But I'm not too worried because half an hour of this being plugged in and I'm good to go. In fact, did not even charge it overnight and just made sure that I plug it in before I go for a shower, and by the time I was out, the battery was almost topped up. That is the convenience you have, the quick top up. Even if you just plug it in for 5-10 minutes, you're getting about 30% of charge going in, and that's really impressive. You will not have to worry about the battery life on this phone, and if you do find yourself in a situation where you can't carry a charger or you will not have access to a plug point, turn the display down to 60 Hz. You get about easy day and a half of usage out of this phone if you have it at 60 Hz. So overall battery life very good, but only if you also factor in the charging speed, because that's what sort of makes up for the 120 Hz refresh rate draining your battery within the day. Last but not the least, we've got the design. Now, I've got this black colored variant, and it's simply elegant. Like, it's a very fairly simple, minimalist and no nonsense design. It's not, Realme is not trying to do something very exceptionally out there with it, but there are a few things that stand out. There are two things in particular. One is the camera bump. I'm not particularly fond of it, but whatever. Secondly, the glass on this thing has a slight treatment where if there's light falling on it, you see reflections within reflections. It's kind of trippy, but you have to really look for it. Last but not least, I have to mention that this phone is just, it hoards fingerprints. Like, it loves it and it hoards them. I have cleaned this phone so many times in the course of this review, it's ridiculous. And that is the case on both the back and the front. The front has a screen protector pre-applied which holds on to fingerprints, but interesting thing is this is not the case on the Oppo Reno 5 Pro 5G. The screen protector on that display was a little more resistant to holding fingerprints. But like if you're like me, you're probably gonna take this phone and put it in the supplied TPU case right from the minute you start. So at least your back is gonna be clean. It's just the front that you're gonna have to worry about. So let's conclude this review with the verdict. Now, what's really cool is that you've got a phone with really impressive day-to-day performance, real-world performance. You've got a camera set which for the most part is above average. Like if you look at the primary camera, it's good, but then the 8 megapixel, the 2 megapixel macro, the 2 megapixel monochrome sensor, they're like fine, like good to have, and you can use them in a pinch, but they're not the most wow camera configurations. You've got a really impressive display. I have to say, like, this is a great panel to be using on a day-to-day basis. Realme UI is actually fairly decent. It's based on Android 10, and I believe there's a beta version with the based on Android 11 in the works that should be coming out soon. The OS does not really have any kinks as such. It works reliably. The battery life is definitely good. Could have been better, but it's all right that it's not, because you get the 65-watt super fast charging with this as well. So overall, like, the phone makes a great case for itself. Now, the only catch here is the price. As of recording this video, we do not know the price of the Realme X7 Pro. If it is under 30K, this phone is going to definitely be setting a whole new benchmark for the performance when it comes to a phone under this price bracket. There's definitely that. It is a good looking smartphone as well. And honestly, like, it's hard not to recommend this smartphone to anybody who wants a phone now. For those who can wait, there's actually a lot of good stuff that is lined up in the coming months. So I would recommend that if you don't need a phone immediately right now, you can wait. But if you need something right now, the X7 Pro is definitely a great choice. Definitely look for it. If you can actually get your hands on a unit, try it out in a store or something, get a feel for it, and then make up your mind. But overall, the X7 Pro does get a fairly positive review from us, to be honest. It's hard to complain for the smartphone. But if you want more details about it, make sure to go over to our website, where we will be tearing down all of the numbers and sharing them with you for the Realme X7 Pro. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I'm going to see you in the next one. But before you leave, make sure to hit the subscribe button on our channel, and of course the bell icon, so that you don't miss any future updates from us.